The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the quiet suburban street. The neighborhood was peaceful, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and the sound of children playing in the yard was a familiar and comforting rhythm. In one of the modest houses, a young black family was winding down their day. The father, tall and calm, was in the kitchen washing dishes, humming a soft tune. His hands moved quickly but carefully, rinsing off plates and cups as the mother brought in a fresh loaf of bread from the pantry. She smiled at him, her eyes reflecting a warmth and contentment that only years of building a life together could create. Their children, a little boy and a little girl, were sitting at the table, laughing quietly as they shared stories about their day at school. Life for this family was simple but full. They didn't have a lot of money, but they had enough. They had love, they had safety, and they had each other. The father had spent many years in the military, and his training had taught him discipline, focus, and the ability to remain calm even in the most chaotic situations. But that life was behind him now. He had left the military to focus on his family, to give them a normal life, something peaceful, something ordinary. He didn't wear medals at home or talk about his missions. That part of him was a quiet strength that showed in the way he handled challenges and treated others. His wife appreciated this about him. She knew that his past gave him a patience and steadiness that kept the household grounded. The evening routine was comforting. The mother served dinner while the father set the table. The children were excited to tell their parents about the small victories and disappointments of their day. The little boy proudly showed his mother a drawing he had made in art class, while the little girl recounted a funny story about a mix-up in her spelling lesson. Laughter filled the kitchen, mingling with the smell of freshly baked bread and the faint scent of herbs from the evening meal. It was a moment of normalcy, a moment of safety, a moment that seemed as though it could stretch on forever. Outside, the street was calm. The evening air was warm but not oppressive, and a gentle breeze moved through the trees, making the leaves whisper softly. Occasionally, a car passed by, but the neighborhood was mostly quiet, as it always was at this hour. From the house, it was easy to forget that the world beyond the neighborhood could be unpredictable, even dangerous. The family lived with a sense of confidence that came from knowing their neighbors, from trusting their surroundings, and from the father's unspoken promise to protect his family no matter what. As the night deepened, the family finished their meal and moved to the living room. The children curled up on the couch, wrapped in a soft blanket, while the parents sat close to them, talking quietly about the week ahead. The father's voice was calm and steady, full of reassurance, and the mother's laughter rang gently through the room. They spoke about small plans, what to cook for the weekend, what chores needed to be done. But beneath those simple conversations was a deeper bond, a connection that had been strengthened through years of shared experiences, challenges, and triumphs. Though their life was ordinary on the surface, it had been shaped by extraordinary circumstances. The father's military experience had taught him the importance of vigilance. He noticed details others might overlook: the way the wind shifted through the trees, the patterns of cars passing by, and the sounds of the neighborhood at night. These instincts were quiet, subtle, and often went unnoticed, but they were always present. He had trained himself to read situations, to anticipate risks, and to act decisively if needed. Yet, in this moment, he allowed himself to relax, to enjoy the safety of home, to simply be a father and a husband. The mother, aware of her husband's calm presence, felt secure. She knew that behind his relaxed demeanor was a readiness to act if anything threatened their family. This gave her peace of mind, allowing her to enjoy these quiet moments without fear. She glanced at their children, their faces glowing in the soft light of the living room, and felt a surge of love and protectiveness. She knew the world could be unpredictable, but here, in this room, they were safe. They were together, and that was what mattered most. The children played quietly for a while, their laughter soft and gentle. The father picked up a book and began reading aloud, his voice steady and comforting. The words painted pictures of faraway lands, of heroes and adventures, of challenges overcome through courage and intelligence. The children listened intently, occasionally asking questions or pointing out something that caught their attention. The mother watched them, a smile on her face, appreciating the simple joy of family life. She thought about how much these moments meant, the small, everyday interactions that built the foundation of their lives together. Outside, the shadows grew longer as night settled fully over the neighborhood. Streetlights flickered on, casting pools of soft light on the pavement below. From the window, it looked peaceful, quiet, and safe. But the father's instincts, honed from years of service in dangerous situations, never completely rested. He noticed a car slowly passing by their house, its headlights dimmed. It didn't belong to any of their neighbors. He made a mental note, but said nothing, not wanting to disturb the calm of the evening. Sometimes these small observations mattered. Sometimes they could make all the difference. The children grew tired and eventually climbed into bed, still chatting quietly about their day. The parents followed shortly after, tucking them in and kissing their foreheads. The father lingered a moment, looking at his children sleeping peacefully, and felt a quiet pride. He had faced many dangers in his life, but nothing mattered more than protecting these little lives, nurturing them, and giving them a world where they could grow safely. The mother stood beside him, resting her hand on his shoulder, and together they shared a silent understanding. This family, their love, and their bond were stronger than anything outside these walls. The night continued with a gentle calm. The father and mother sat in the living room for a few more minutes, talking quietly about plans for the next day, listening to the faint sounds of the neighborhood at night. The father's military training had taught him to always be prepared, but he also knew the importance of enjoying moments like this. He could feel the weight of responsibility in his chest, but it was balanced by the joy and love surrounding him. It was a rare equilibrium, one that he cherished deeply. In these moments, the family appeared ordinary to anyone passing by. They were just another household, another young family in a quiet neighborhood. But there was a depth to their lives that could not be seen at first glance. Strength, courage, and love intertwined in subtle ways, shaping the way they interacted with each other and the world. They had built a sanctuary within their home, a place where laughter, comfort, and understanding were constant. They had worked hard for this peace, and it was something they did not take lightly. As the night grew late, the parents finally went to bed themselves. They lay together, listening to the soft breathing of their children in the next room. The father thought briefly about his past, the missions, the dangers, the intense training, but then he let those thoughts go. Here, in the quiet of the night, surrounded by the family he loved, he was free from the weight of that life. He was a husband, a father, a protector. That was enough. Little did they know, however, that this peace, this ordinary night in their quiet neighborhood, was about to be tested. There were forces outside their home, beyond their control, that would challenge everything they had built. It was an unexpected danger, one that would come without warning, shaking the family to its core. But for now, in these fleeting hours, life was calm, life was simple, and life was theirs to enjoy. The warmth of the evening, the laughter of the children, and the quiet presence of love filled the house completely. It was a perfect moment, fragile and precious, like the calm before a storm. And in that calm, the father's quiet strength remained. It was a strength born of experience, of love, and of unwavering dedication to those who depended on him. It was a strength that would soon be tested in ways he could never have anticipated. But for now, it simply existed, a silent guardian over a home full of life, hope, and dreams. The family slept, unaware of the challenge coming their way, but ready, in ways they didn't yet know, to face it together. The next morning began like any other. Sunlight streamed softly through the curtains, and the sounds of birds chirping filled the small house. The family was awake early, the children excited for a day at school, the parents quietly moving about to prepare breakfast. The father was humming a soft tune again, moving with the same calm, precise motions he always did. He enjoyed these mornings, the simple rhythm of life that felt steady and safe. The mother laughed at a joke the little boy made, and the little girl twirled around in the living room, her energy bright and lively. They had a plan for the day. The children needed to be ready for school, and afterward, The mother would run some errands while the father tended to chores around the house. It was ordinary, predictable, and comforting. The father, even with all his past experience in dangerous situations, appreciated days like this the most. These were the moments he felt that life had finally slowed down enough for him to enjoy without constant vigilance. But he also knew that no matter how peaceful life seemed, it could change in an instant. That awareness was always there, just beneath the surface. After breakfast, the children got ready for school. Their backpacks were neatly packed, lunches carefully placed inside, and shoes tied tightly. The father gave each of them a quick hug and a gentle reminder to behave and stay safe. The mother adjusted the little girl's hair and kissed the boy on the forehead. The house was filled with light chatter and laughter as the family moved through the morning routine. Everything seemed normal, ordinary, and comfortable. They stepped outside to load the children into the car. The driveway was calm, and the street was quiet, the neighborhood still waking up. The father checked the surroundings instinctively, scanning the street with trained eyes, noting the positions of parked cars, the movement of people, and anything unusual. He didn't see anything that stood out, but the habit of observation was ingrained. It had been part of him for so long that even in the most peaceful moments, he remained alert. The children climbed into the back seat, chatting and giggling, their energy infectious. The mother buckled them in, smiling at their excitement for the day. They began to drive to school, taking the familiar route through the neighborhood. The father's eyes moved constantly, noting the traffic, the pedestrians, and any vehicles that seemed out of place. The neighborhood was safe most of the time, but he had learned from experience that danger often came when it was least expected. They drove slowly, making turns carefully, and waved to neighbors who were beginning their day. It was a normal scene, a calm morning, nothing out of the ordinary. That calm, however, did not last. As they approached a quiet intersection, a police car appeared behind them. The lights flashed suddenly, and the father instinctively pulled over to the side of the road. His heart rate remained steady, his mind immediately processing the situation. He had been stopped by law enforcement before, but this stop felt different. There was tension in the air, a heaviness that he couldn't quite place. He glanced at his wife and children, reassuring them with a calm nod. The children looked curious and slightly concerned, sensing the seriousness without fully understanding it. The police officer approached the car with a firm, authoritative stride. His voice was loud and sharp as he demanded to know why the father had been driving in that area. The father responded politely, answering questions clearly and calmly, trying to maintain a cooperative tone. The mother kept a protective hand on the children, her eyes alert and worried. The children sat quietly, unsure of what was happening but trusting their father to handle the situation. The officer's demeanor changed quickly. What had started as a routine check escalated as the officer's tone grew more aggressive. He questioned the father's actions, demanded to see identification, and made assumptions without giving him a chance to explain. The father remained composed, his military training guiding him to stay calm and measured. He understood that any sudden movements or sharp words could escalate the situation further, so he answered carefully, trying to de-escalate the tension. The mother's worry grew as the officer leaned closer, speaking sharply. She gently placed a hand on the father's arm, signaling both concern and support. The children were now silent, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. The little boy's hands clutched the seat, and the little girl hugged her backpack tightly. The father kept his voice steady, explaining that they had done nothing wrong, that they were simply on their way to school. He emphasized cooperation, hoping to calm the situation before it turned dangerous. The officer's suspicion, however, only seemed to intensify. He began to shout commands, ordering the father to step out of the car and to place his hands where they could be seen. The mother instinctively moved closer to the children, shielding them slightly, her voice rising in alarm as she tried to reason with the officer. The father remained calm but alert, his body tense and ready to react if needed. He followed the commands slowly and deliberately, careful not to make sudden moves that could be misinterpreted. Other officers arrived quickly, their presence adding to the tension. The father noticed the sudden change in the atmosphere, the heightened energy, the quick movements, the flashing lights reflecting off the car windows. He scanned the surroundings, noting every detail. He kept a close eye on his children and wife, ensuring they were protected while still cooperating with the officers. Every instinct from his past life came into play, guiding his actions and keeping him grounded. The situation escalated further when one of the officers misinterpreted the father's calm demeanor as resistance. The officers moved closer, their voices louder, their gestures more aggressive. The mother tried to speak, to explain that the family was not a threat, but she was interrupted. The children's fear became palpable. The little boy clung to his sister, and the little girl's tears began to form. The father's heart ached at their fear, but he remained focused. He knew that showing panic or anger would make the situation worse. His calmness was now a shield, protecting not just himself, but the entire family. Suddenly, one officer reached for the father's arm, attempting to assert control physically. The father did not resist violently but used his strength and presence to maintain balance, keeping himself and his family safe. He spoke in a low, steady voice, trying to de-escalate and explain their innocence. The tension was thick, almost unbearable, as the officers misjudged the situation. Every word, every gesture mattered. One wrong move could turn the encounter into something far worse. The mother whispered to the children to stay quiet, to trust their father. The children's eyes were wide, fear mixing with confusion. The father's military training had prepared him for dangerous confrontations, but this was different. There were no clear rules, no predictable outcome. It was unpredictable, volatile, and frightening. Yet he stayed composed, aware that his control over the situation could save his family from harm. Neighbors began to notice the commotion, stepping out of their homes to see what was happening. Some called for help, others recorded the scene on their phones. The presence of witnesses added another layer of complexity, but the father's priority remained the same: protect his family. He carefully positioned himself between the officers and his children, using his body to shield them as much as possible. He spoke calmly, repeating that they were innocent, that they were just a family going about their day. Minutes felt like hours. The officers continued to assert control, misunderstanding the father's patience for defiance. Every passing second increased the tension, every motion had to be calculated. The father's eyes never left his family, never left the children who were scared and confused. He stayed aware of the environment, anticipating actions, ready to respond if the situation worsened. The calm he had cultivated over years of training became the anchor keeping his family safe amidst chaos. Through it all, the mother's presence was steady. She whispered reassurance to the children, kept them close, and reinforced their father's instructions. Her support was unwavering, and her courage in the face of fear strengthened the family's bond. The children, sensing their parents' determination, began to mirror some of that calm, though their fear remained. The family's unity became a shield in itself, a barrier against the uncertainty outside their control. The scene reached a critical point as the father realized that mere words might not be enough to calm the situation. He needed to assert authority, not through aggression, but through presence and knowledge. He prepared to reveal a part of himself he had kept hidden for years, knowing it might be the only way to protect his family fully. He had hoped never to use it in civilian life, but circumstances had pushed him to the edge. The officers, unaware of his identity or experience, had no idea what they were dealing with. For now, the family remained together, tense but united. The officers' actions were unpredictable, the environment charged with suspicion and fear, but the father's quiet strength, his careful planning, and his unwavering focus were the only constants in the storm. He watched, waited, and prepared to act if necessary, knowing that his family's safety depended on every decision he made. The ordinary morning that had begun with laughter and calm had transformed into a test of courage, patience, and resilience. And in that moment, the father understood fully that the world outside his home was far from ordinary, could be dangerous, unfair, and unpredictable. But he was ready. He had trained for challenges before, and he would protect his family through this one as well. The children's fear, the mother's concern, and the officer's aggression all converged into a single reality. The family's peace was being challenged, and only their strength, unity, and composure could carry them through. The morning air, once calm and quiet, now felt heavy and tense. The small family sat in their car, their hearts pounding, their breaths shallow, as the officers continued to surround them. What had begun as a routine stop had escalated into a situation neither the family nor the police could easily control. The father remained calm on the surface, but inside, his mind was a storm of calculations. Every movement, every word had to be precise. He knew that one mistake, one sudden motion could trigger chaos. His wife kept her hand on the children, holding them close, whispering gentle reassurances even as fear flickered across her face. The children, too young to fully understand, sensed the danger and huddled together, their small hands gripping each other tightly. The lead officer's voice cut through the morning air, sharp and commanding. He demanded the father step out of the vehicle immediately. The father complied slowly, keeping his hands visible and his movements deliberate. He stepped onto the pavement with careful precision, each motion measured. His eyes never left the officers, noting their positions, their gestures, the tension in their bodies. The mother opened the car door slightly to reach for the children, and the officer shouted at her to step back. She froze, torn between following orders and protecting her children. The little boy and little girl clung to their mother, confusion and fear reflected in their wide eyes. The father raised his voice calmly but firmly, trying to explain that they meant no harm and that they were only on their way to school. His words were precise, measured, designed to de-escalate the situation. Yet the officer's suspicion seemed only to grow. They shouted over him, their commands sharp and impatient. Another officer moved closer, attempting to grab the father's arm to assert control. The father did not resist violently, but he used a controlled strength to maintain balance, keeping himself and his family safe. His military training, though years old, guided every move. Inside the car, the mother tried to calm the children, whispering that their father was protecting them, that they were safe if they stayed quiet. Her voice shook slightly, betraying the fear she was trying to hide. The children's eyes darted back and forth between their father and the officers, trying to understand what was happening. The father, aware of their gaze, projected calm authority. He spoke to them in low, reassuring tones, telling them to trust him, to stay close to their mother, to remain silent. The tension mounted as more officers arrived at the scene. The father noted each new arrival, their positions, and the way they moved. His mind raced through every possible scenario, anticipating potential outcomes, preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. He remained composed outwardly, but the adrenaline in his veins sharpened every sense. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Protecting his family was no longer just a promise. It was an urgent, immediate necessity. The lead officer, growing frustrated with the father's calm demeanor, began issuing more aggressive commands. Step out, turn around, put your hands behind your back. The father followed each instruction slowly, deliberately, ensuring that nothing he did could be misinterpreted. Yet the officer's suspicion persisted, and the situation teetered on the edge of violence. The father knew that reasoning alone might not be enough to calm the officers. He had to maintain control over his own actions while managing the unpredictable behavior of those around him. The mother, sensing the rising danger, tried once again to speak. "Please, you don't understand. They're just children," she pleaded. Her voice was urgent but polite, carrying a mix of fear and determination. The officers barely acknowledged her, focusing instead on the father. The children, their small faces pale, clung to her arms, their trust in their parents the only anchor in the storm of confusion and fear surrounding them. Suddenly, the lead officer stepped closer, reaching for the father with force. The father anticipated the movement, using a controlled pivot to maintain distance while keeping his hands visible. He spoke in a steady, calm voice, repeating that they were not a threat, that they had done nothing wrong. The officer misinterpreted the calm as defiance, and the tension escalated further. Every word now mattered. Every gesture could trigger a reaction that might spiral out of control. Neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the shouting and commotion. Some began filming the encounter on their phones, adding another layer of complexity. The presence of witnesses made the officers even more aware of their actions, their movements sharp, their voices loud. The father, however, remained focused entirely on his family. He kept his body between the officers and his children, shielding them as best he could without provoking further aggression. He spoke clearly, calmly, his voice unwavering, even as the fear in the air thickened. The little boy whispered a question to his sister, his voice trembling. "Why are they so angry at Daddy?" She didn't answer, but squeezed his hand tightly. The father, hearing the faint whisper, glanced briefly at them, offering a small, reassuring nod. He wanted them to know he was there, that they would be okay, even if the world outside seemed chaotic and unpredictable. He drew strength from the family's trust, their reliance on him, and the knowledge that panic could make the situation worse. The officers, still unsure of the father's intentions, began to close in. One of them grabbed at his jacket, attempting to assert control. The father reacted with controlled strength, stepping back carefully to maintain distance while keeping the children in sight. He spoke firmly, repeating that he was cooperating and that there was no threat. The officers, frustrated by his composure, misinterpreted his calm as resistance. The tension reached a breaking point, the atmosphere thick with uncertainty and fear. The mother's heart raced as she saw the officers moving closer. She whispered to the children again, "Stay calm. Trust your father. Everything will be okay." Her words were a fragile thread of comfort, but the children clung to it desperately. The father's eyes remained fixed on the officers, reading their intentions, anticipating their next move. He could feel the adrenaline sharpening every sense, making him aware of every detail, the slight shift in an officer's stance, the tightening of a hand, the sudden glance. Every small action mattered now. The father realized that words might not be enough to de-escalate the situation. The officer's aggression and misunderstanding had created a volatile environment. He needed to assert authority in a way that would command respect and attention without provoking violence. He stayed calm, controlled, and deliberate, using every instinct he had developed over years of training. He knew that protecting his family required not just patience but also precision and timing. One officer, growing impatient, moved to grab the father's arm again. The father remained composed but strong, resisting the pull just enough to maintain his position while keeping his hands visible. His calm, controlled demeanor began to shift the dynamics subtly. The officers, though still aggressive, sensed that they were dealing with someone trained, disciplined, and capable. The father's presence, though quiet, conveyed authority and control in a way that words alone could not. The mother continued to comfort the children, whispering encouragement, reminding them to stay still and calm. The little girl pressed her face into her mother's shoulder, trying to feel the safety she knew was there despite the chaos outside. The father's eyes never left the officers, and his body remained between them and his family. He projected calm authority, his voice steady, his tone firm but non-threatening. Every movement was precise, deliberate, and protective. The situation seemed to hang in the air, suspended between aggression and restraint. The officers were unsure, the family tense, and the neighbors watching. The father's patience, his calm, and his careful control became the anchor in the storm. He repeated his assurances clearly and firmly, each word chosen to minimize misunderstanding. He made no sudden movements, no gestures that could be misread. His focus was entirely on keeping his family safe and preventing the situation from spiraling out of control. Minutes passed like hours. The tension was palpable. The officers continued to assert control, the family remained calm but wary, and the father calculated every possible outcome. He understood fully that the situation could escalate in an instant. He also knew that his composure was the only thing keeping the chaos from turning into something far worse. He remained vigilant, protecting his family with every ounce of focus, every instinct, and every measured movement. Finally, as the father assessed the officer's body language, he realized that reasoning alone might no longer suffice. The officers had no understanding of who he really was or the skills he possessed. His calm composure, his deliberate movements, his steady voice, these were not just patience or politeness. They were trained responses honed over years of dangerous experience. He knew that if the officers continued to misinterpret him, the encounter could escalate further. He had to prepare for the next step carefully, ready to act decisively if necessary. The mother whispered once more to the children, her voice trembling slightly. "Daddy knows what to do. Stay quiet. Stay close. Trust him." The children nodded silently, their trust in their parents absolute despite the fear in their hearts. The father's eyes met theirs briefly, offering reassurance, a silent promise that they would be protected no matter what. His body remained a shield, his presence a barrier between them and the unpredictability of the officer's actions. The morning, once calm and ordinary, had become a crucible. The father, the mother, and the children were tested not just by the officer's aggression but by the fear and uncertainty that had invaded their day. The father's military training, his discipline, and his experience guided every action. The mother's courage, her support, and her reassurance held the children together. And the children, though scared, were learning the quiet strength of trusting their parents in moments of crisis. In this charged environment, every second mattered. Every word, every gesture, every movement could change the outcome. The father's calm authority, his careful planning, and his unwavering focus became the anchor that prevented the situation from spiraling completely out of control. And while the officers remained unaware of the true depth of his experience, the family was beginning to understand just how critical his presence and control were in protecting them from the unpredictable danger around them. The tension hung in the air like a thick fog, making every movement feel heavier, every sound sharper. The father stood with steady composure, his eyes calm but alert, watching the officers closely. His family remained behind him, huddled together, clinging to each other for comfort. The mother whispered soothing words to the children, trying to calm their fear, while the father kept one hand slightly raised to indicate safety without sudden motion. The officers were frustrated, their impatience evident, as they misread the father's calmness as defiance. The scene teetered on the edge of chaos, and the father knew that reasoning alone might not be enough to prevent disaster. He took a deep breath, centering himself. For years, he had trained to act decisively under extreme pressure, to think clearly when chaos surrounded him. That training, ingrained deep in his muscles and instincts, had kept him alive in situations far more dangerous than this one. But this was different. This was his family, his children, his wife, and every wrong move could harm them. He could no longer rely solely on patience and calm words. He needed the officers to understand, in no uncertain terms, that they were dealing with someone they could not underestimate. In a firm, controlled voice, he addressed the lead officer directly. "I need you to listen carefully," he said. His tone carried authority, not aggression. "I am trained for situations like this. I have served in the military at the highest levels, and I know how to handle conflict safely. I am not here to resist you, but I will not allow harm to come to my family." For a moment, silence filled the space between them. The officers froze, their faces registering a mix of shock, confusion, and suddenly a deep realization that they were facing someone whose experience far exceeded their expectations. The father's words carried weight because they were backed by confidence, by the knowledge of skills and experience that were not visible at first glance. The officers could sense it in his calm stance, in the way he held himself, in the unshakable focus in his eyes. The mother's hand tightened around the children as she looked at her husband, relief flickering through her fear. She had always known he was capable, had seen his calm authority in small moments, but this was the first time she truly understood the depth of his experience. The children, too young to grasp the full meaning of what he had said, felt the change. The tension in the air shifted slightly, replaced by the sense that their father was in control, that they were safe despite the danger surrounding them. One officer, still cautious but now hesitant, stepped back slightly. His eyes searched the father's face, trying to gauge whether he was bluffing or speaking truth. The father did not move, did not flinch, did not show any hint of aggression. His presence alone commanded respect. Every instinct the officers had, honed for dealing with conflict, told them that this was not a situation to underestimate. The father's calm authority radiated from him, filling the space with a silent warning that any rash action could have serious consequences. The mother whispered softly to the children, "Everything will be okay now. Your father knows what he's doing." The children's eyes were wide, still scared, but their trust in their parents was unwavering. They clung to her, but their fear began to lessen as they sensed the shift in the officer's behavior. The father's revelation had created a turning point. What had been a tense, unpredictable confrontation now had a new balance, one that favored the family because of his knowledge, his presence, and his unwavering focus. The lead officer, realizing the gravity of the situation, adjusted his stance. His voice, previously sharp and commanding, now held a different tone, a mixture of caution and respect. "We need to resolve this safely," he said, his words careful. "We were unaware of your background. We don't want this to escalate further." The father nodded, acknowledging the change. He kept his movements deliberate, showing continued cooperation while maintaining his protective stance. As the tension slowly eased, the father took a step forward, not aggressively, but firmly. He instructed the officers to step back slightly, creating space around his family. His voice was steady, calm, and commanding. "I will cooperate fully, but I will not allow my family to be harmed. I need you to follow my instructions carefully to prevent any mistakes." The officers, recognizing both the authority and the danger in his words, complied. They moved back just enough to reduce immediate risk, still alert, still cautious, but aware that their previous approach had been misjudged. The mother let out a soft breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. Relief began to replace fear, though the memory of the tense moments lingered. She looked at her husband with a new sense of admiration, seeing not just the man she loved, but the protector who had trained, endured, and survived unimaginable situations. The children, sensing the change in tone, began to relax slightly. Their father's presence had always been comforting, but now it was almost tangible, like a shield around them, invisible but impenetrable. The officers, still processing the revelation, began to adjust their approach. Their movements became less aggressive, their voices calmer. They asked questions, not as commands, but to clarify the situation and ensure everyone's safety. The father answered each one carefully, maintaining control while demonstrating that he was fully compliant but also fully capable. The shift in energy was noticeable. What had been a confrontation teetering on the edge of chaos was slowly transforming into a controlled, cautious resolution. Neighbors, who had been watching with a mix of curiosity and concern, began to step back, sensing the change in the atmosphere. The tension that had gripped the street now seemed to lift slightly. The father's calm authority and revelation of his background had created an invisible boundary that commanded respect. Even without weapons drawn, without force used, the officers were now aware that they were dealing with someone whose skills and experience far exceeded their assumptions. The mother took the opportunity to speak quietly to the officers, reinforcing the father's words. She explained that the children were frightened and that the family had been trying to cooperate fully. Her tone was calm but firm, her voice steady. The officers listened, their posture relaxing further as they realized that the family's intent had never been hostile. The children, still clinging to their mother, began to calm as well, sensing the shift in mood. The father continued to maintain a composed presence, subtly guiding the family through the encounter. He gave clear instructions, ensuring that his wife and children remained calm, that their movements were deliberate, and that the officers could observe cooperation without misunderstanding. His voice, steady and authoritative, carried reassurance not only for his family but also for the officers. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant attention, precision, and control. Slowly, the officers began to withdraw slightly, acknowledging both the father's authority and their own misjudgment. The lead officer spoke quietly to his colleagues, coordinating a way to resolve the encounter without further escalation. The father maintained a calm stance, hands visible, eyes steady, ready to intervene if necessary, but allowing the situation to settle. The mother held the children close, her own body relaxing as she realized that the immediate danger had passed. The little boy whispered, "Daddy, are we safe now?" The father crouched slightly to meet his son's gaze, his voice calm and reassuring. "Yes, we're safe. I've got you both. Everything will be okay." The little girl nodded silently, pressing against her mother, beginning to trust that the chaos was over. The father's presence, his calm authority, and his unwavering focus had created safety in a situation that had been spiraling toward disaster just moments before. The officers, now fully aware of the father's background, adjusted their approach entirely. They began to speak calmly, carefully choosing their words, understanding that they were no longer dealing with a routine situation. The father, sensing the change, remained steady but alert, ensuring that the family stayed safe and that the encounter could be resolved without harm. His experience, his training, and his ability to read the situation had shifted the balance of power, but always with an emphasis on protection rather than aggression. As the situation gradually calmed, the mother took a deep breath and whispered softly to her husband, "Thank you. You saved us." He nodded quietly, his eyes still scanning the environment, but relief flickered across his face. He had managed to protect his family without resorting to violence, using calm authority, experience, and presence. The children, sensing that the threat had passed, began to relax further, their small hands loosening from their mother's grip. The lead officer finally spoke, his voice measured and careful. "We apologize for the misunderstanding. We did not know who we were dealing with, and it was never our intention to harm your family." The father nodded once, acknowledging the statement but remaining composed. He knew that words alone could not undo the fear and tension, but they were a necessary step toward resolution. The family, still shaken but safe, began to gather themselves. The father guided his wife and children back to the car, maintaining a protective presence as the officers stepped back completely. The neighborhood, once tense with the uncertainty of what was unfolding, began to return to normal as witnesses recognized the de-escalation. The father's calm authority had prevented a tragedy, had protected his family, and had ensured that the encounter ended without violence. The sun had climbed high in the sky, casting a bright light over the neighborhood that now felt strangely quiet. The commotion of the morning had faded, leaving only the echoes of tense voices and flashing lights in memory. The family sat in their car for a moment, the engine turned off, taking a collective breath as they processed everything that had just happened. Their bodies were tense, their hearts still racing, but relief had begun to seep in. They were safe. They were together. And that knowledge, simple as it seemed, was more powerful than any words could convey. The father glanced at his wife and children, his eyes softening as he saw the relief in their faces. The mother's hand rested gently on the children, holding them close, and they clung to her in turn, seeking comfort and stability. The father's mind, still alert from the morning's chaos, slowly allowed a moment to breathe. He had protected his family, kept them safe, and now they could begin to process the shock and fear that had gripped them. The tension of the encounter lingered like a shadow, but it was fading with each passing second. The mother finally spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "We're okay now," she said. "Everything is going to be all right." The children nodded quietly, their small hands holding onto each other, drawing strength from the closeness of their parents. The father reached back, resting a hand on each of their shoulders, feeling their warmth and life. "We made it," he said softly. "We stayed together, and that's what matters." The simplicity of his words carried a weight beyond the moment. It was a reminder that, despite fear, danger, and uncertainty, the bond of family could withstand almost anything. They slowly began to move, leaving the scene behind, but the father's mind remained alert. He drove carefully through the familiar streets, scanning the environment, but the immediate threat had passed. The officers had left, and the neighbors were returning to their routines. The world outside seemed unchanged, ordinary once more. But for this family, life had shifted. The morning's events had left an imprint on their hearts, a memory of fear, courage, and resilience that would stay with them forever. As they drove, the mother spoke quietly, reflecting on the morning. "I've never been so scared," she admitted. "But I've also never been so proud of you. You kept us safe. You stayed calm. You handled it all." The father nodded, understanding her meaning. He had acted instinctively, relying on every ounce of his training and experience, but he also knew that the strength of his family, his wife's courage, the children's trust, had been equally important. It was a shared strength, a collective resilience that had made them unshakable in the moment of danger. The little boy finally spoke, his voice small but curious. "Daddy, why were they so angry?" The father glanced at him in the rearview mirror, offering a calm, reassuring smile. "Sometimes people make mistakes," he explained gently. "Sometimes they misunderstand things. But we stayed calm, we stayed together, and we made it through safely. That's what matters." The little girl nodded, still holding onto her mother, processing the reassurance in her own way. It was a beginning for them to understand that fear could be faced and overcome when families stood as one. Back at home, the family slowly began to return to their usual routines, though nothing felt quite the same. The mother prepared lunch while the father checked on the children, helping them with small tasks and guiding them gently. The morning's events had left traces of fear, but they also left a sense of strength and unity. The children were quiet, thoughtful, perhaps processing the emotions they didn't fully understand yet. The father spoke to them softly, explaining that the world could be unpredictable, that some people might react out of fear or misunderstanding, but that their safety could always be maintained when they trusted each other. Later, the father stepped outside to speak with a neighbor who had witnessed part of the encounter. He wanted to explain, not to boast, but to help others understand what had happened and why caution and patience mattered in tense situations. He spoke calmly, clearly, sharing only what was necessary, emphasizing the importance of staying composed and protecting loved ones. The neighbor listened, respect evident in their eyes, realizing the depth of control and courage the father had maintained throughout the ordeal. The mother stayed inside with the children, preparing a small snack, her voice soothing, her presence grounding them. She encouraged them to talk about their feelings, to ask questions, and to express any lingering fear. The little girl hesitated at first but eventually whispered about the flashing lights, the loud voices, and the fear she had felt. The mother listened patiently, nodding, acknowledging each emotion. "It's okay to feel scared," she said gently. "But remember, we are always together, and we will always protect each other." The children clung to her, absorbing the reassurance like sunlight after a storm. As the day moved on, the father sat down with his wife, quietly reflecting on what had happened. He spoke not of fear or danger, but of gratitude for the calm, for the family's trust, and for the ability to act decisively when it mattered most. "We handled it well," he said softly. "Not because I was stronger than anyone else, but because we stayed together. We relied on each other. That's the real strength." His wife nodded, understanding fully. It was a lesson in courage, not born of aggression, but of patience, composure, and unity. The children, eventually growing tired, rested quietly in their rooms. The father checked on them one last time, ensuring that they were safe, that they were calm, and that the lingering fear had been replaced with comfort. He kissed their foreheads and whispered reassurance, reminding them that their family was unbreakable. The mother watched from the doorway, feeling a profound sense of pride and relief. The family had faced uncertainty, danger, and fear, yet they remained whole, bonded, and stronger than before. The father and mother finally sat together in the living room, the quiet of the afternoon settling around them. They reflected on the events, understanding that the morning had been a harsh test of their unity and resilience. They had faced a situation they could not have predicted, yet they had navigated it with calm, composure, and trust in each other. Their children, though young, had observed courage in action, learning lessons in patience, strength, and the importance of staying together in times of fear. As the day drew to a close, the family gathered for a simple meal together. The conversation was light, laughter slowly returning to the room, the atmosphere warming once more. The father shared small anecdotes, not of military exploits, but of lessons in calmness, patience, and teamwork. The children listened, absorbing the quiet wisdom of experience without fear, feeling the security that came from being part of a family that had faced danger and emerged unbroken. Neighbors waved as they passed by the house, and the father acknowledged them with a nod and a small smile. Life had returned to its familiar rhythm, though the memory of the morning's events lingered. The family knew that the world could be unpredictable, that misunderstanding and fear could create chaos at any moment. Yet they also knew that their bond, their trust, and their ability to remain calm under pressure were stronger than any external force. As night approached, the family settled in for the evening. The children were tucked into bed, their small hands holding onto each other as they drifted into sleep. The mother stayed for a moment, whispering reassurance, while the father lingered outside the bedroom door, reflecting quietly on the day. He had kept his promise, had protected his family, and had taught them, without words, the power of calm, focus, and trust. The world outside might remain unpredictable, but inside their home, they had created safety, love, and strength. The father joined his wife on the couch, their hands intertwined. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of the day settle. Relief and gratitude mingled with lingering tension, but the overriding feeling was one of unity and resilience. They had faced fear and uncertainty together and emerged stronger. The father's quiet strength, the mother's unwavering support, and the children's trust had created a shield around them that could withstand almost anything. In the days that followed, the family slowly returned to routine. The children went to school, the parents resumed their work and household responsibilities, and the neighborhood returned to its familiar calm. Yet, the memory of the morning lingered, a reminder of how quickly life could change and how important it was to remain vigilant, calm, and united. The father's experience, once hidden, had been revealed not for pride, but for protection. It had ensured their safety and left an indelible mark on the family's understanding of courage and resilience. Evenings became moments of reflection and conversation. The mother and father spoke quietly about the importance of patience, composure, and understanding. They discussed the lessons learned, not just about fear or danger, but about the strength that comes from trust, unity, and love. The children listened, absorbing these lessons in small ways, internalizing the importance of family, courage, and the quiet strength that lies in staying calm under pressure. The family's bond grew even stronger after the incident. They realized that safety and love were not just about physical protection but about emotional support, trust, and understanding. They laughed more, spoke more openly, and held each other closer. The morning's events had been frightening, but they had also become a source of growth, a reminder that they could face fear together and emerge whole. As the house grew quiet and the family settled in for the night, the father looked out the window, watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. He thought about the day, about the challenges they had faced, and about the strength that had carried them through. He smiled softly, knowing that the family was safe, that they were together, and that their bond was unbreakable. The world outside might remain unpredictable, but inside their home, love, trust, and courage created a sanctuary that could withstand almost anything. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, the family rested, together, whole, and stronger than ever.